Hi, I promised you that we would be talking about A and F in this video, and it's still not Abercrombie and Fitch. We are talking about apologies and forgiveness. And I think this is a pretty loaded space for some people because oftentimes as children, even if our families did something wrong, if our parents did something wrong, they didn't typically take responsibility and apologize. And we didn't really learn about forgiveness. We were ordered to forgive if our siblings, took our toy or we hit somebody or, if some squabble happened, we were forced to forgive, but we didn't really understand what that was. So I want to just take a few moments. This is going to be a shorter video to talk about apologies and forgiveness, which I really see as two sides of one coin. And when you are in a profoundly important adult relationship with another human, you will be apologizing and forgiving a lot. That is part of the package. That is part of what's going on, is your responsibility to own your experience and forgive someone who is owning theirs. So in apologizing, we have three sections. We have the acknowledgement. So what is it that you did wrong? What is it that you are owning up to? What are you taking responsibility for? The next thing is reflection, which is how it impacted the other person. After thinking about it, what did it mean to them? What did it mean to you? Once you thought about it and reflected on it, how do you see things differently? And then the third piece is commitment to change. So what can you do differently next time because of this experience? Because you reflected and you recognized that you had a hand in the outcome, which was not what you wanted. How do you change it next time? What can you do differently so that the outcome is different? And when you follow this ARC, this ARC, acknowledgement, reflection, and commitment to change formula, you can really see that apologizing doesn't actually make you inferior. It doesn't make you powerless. It's actually a very powerful place to take ownership and responsibility for your role in what happened. Now, on the forgiveness side, there's also a formula that I use, and it's a 5-step process. So when you need to provide forgiveness for someone, we need to say right off the bat, it has nothing to do with the idea that they deserve your forgiveness, okay? It has nothing to do with if they even deserve it or not, if they have earned it, if they should even have it. Forgiveness is about you. Forgiveness is about releasing the hold that the other person's actions have on you. They don't even need to know about this. You can forgive somebody and never speak to them about it. You can forgive somebody and never explain this process. You can forgive someone who actually doesn't even know they hurt you. So they don't even know that something happened in the first place, and you can still forgive them because forgiveness is about your journey. It's about your process. It has nothing to do with their level of deserving it, expecting it, needing it, or being able to move forward from it. Not at all. So the 5-step process for forgiveness is to first recall the incident. So you can journal this. You can do talk therapy with a therapist or a counselor or even a trusted advisor or a friend or a family member. If the forgiveness is with somebody who still has some control over you, still has some power, if you had an altercation with your partner, perhaps doing this work with your partner at this time is not advisable. It really is important for you to practice the process before you go into some of your current and hot relationships, right? Like relationships that have the potential to go back to winter. Because forgiveness is, it might actually still be something that can hurt you again in the future. So you want to just be careful to start practicing your forgiveness with things that are not immediate and ever present in your life. So start with something that might be a little bit more distant in time or in geography or in meaning, an old colleague, a coach that said something mean, a teacher that gave you a terrible mark and said you would never amount to anything. You can start there. There will be times after you have practiced this a number of times that you will need to forgive your partner for things, right? There will be instances in your relationship where you can reflect back and think, oh, yeah, I really can forgive them for that. And that is a very honorable and beautiful gift to give yourself, that you are not hanging on to the hurt, right? Because forgiveness really does release the anger that you keep inside of you, compartmentalized and sitting there waiting for a hot button to be pushed. And then, all of that anger kind of collides with the current hurt to make an even bigger explosive thing. So forgiveness, the first thing, of course, is to recall the incident. Now, this may be painful, right? It may really hurt. It might really bring you back to that space where the initial hurt happened. And that's okay. That's okay. We have become a culture in which we don't want to feel the uncomfortable things. We don't want to go to discomfort, but we're losing out. We need to go to those messy places. We need to go to those places where the shadow side lives, because it's in those spaces when we shine a light that we see actually we don't have to be afraid of that, or it doesn't hold that kind of power over us anymore, or it shouldn't impact us today, when it really doesn't define who we are. We get to define who we are, right? So when you shine a light on something, you really get to choose, is this as important as I have made it out to be? You want to be able to get to a place where you can understand and maybe even empathize with their point of view, right? So there may be times in your history where you absolutely cannot do this. Let's not start with that one. Pick a time or a place in your memories where you can practice forgiveness, where you can actually put yourself in their shoes. You can see there might be extenuating circumstances. You can stop the spotlighting and open up the view of the camera to capture the whole picture. In that, you might see things you didn't see before. The next step is to altruistically recall a time when you had been forgiven. So this would obviously be a time in which you knew you were being forgiven, right? It wouldn't just be a time that you didn't know. You know that you were forgiven. Somebody said, I forgive you. So you know what it feels like to repair a rupture. Maybe this was in an older friendship. Maybe this was with your parent or a sibling or a family member, that they forgave you for a mistake that you made. Because one thing we often do is, when we are in a place of winter and the early days of spring, we, in our minds, find problems, or we find an enemy. We find a place to put our hurt. We find somebody to take our anger. And if we're in a love relationship, oftentimes we put that on our partner, especially if there has been conflict and bumpy roads. So we often hold them responsible for things that they didn't do, or they didn't say, or they didn't even intend or mean, but we've layered some extra things on top to inflame it, because our brain wants to get rid of the uncomfortable feelings. When we're able to remember a time that we were forgiven, it makes it a little bit easier for us to say, that's what it feels like. There is a hurt, there is a healing, and then there is a reconnection, right? So your brain can remember the time that you had that reconnection, and that feels really special. So when you're able to feel that about your other person who you're forgiving, it makes it a little bit easier for you to decide that this is the right thing to do, because you know what it feels like to be forgiven, and so you want to have that feeling again. You want to share why you are forgiving the person. Now, this can be done in letter form if you're not in touch with the person, because remember, we might take something that's not super inflammatory as being something we practice forgiveness. If we forgive a lot of people all the time, we don't need practice. But if this is new to you, you might need to practice. So you want to be able to write down why you are forgiving them. This might come out of your empathy for them, or your looking at the whole picture. Maybe you saw things you didn't see in the initial hurt. Maybe as you were journaling, you recognized there were all these extenuating circumstances surrounding this incident, and unfortunately you got the blowback. But there's a lot going on that had nothing to do with you, and that's actually really sucky for the person who lashed out at you or said mean things to you or hurt you in some way, because that must have been really hard for them, right? So you can appreciate where they came from. It does not excuse the behavior at all. But when you're spotlighting on only the hurt, remember all those things we miss. And we don't want to miss things. We want to see more things, because that makes a more complete picture. Remember the Salvador Dali picture, right? With the very small little spotlight circle. When you see the whole thing, you can appreciate so much more depth and complexity. This is that same thing. And the last step of forgiveness is to hold on to the healing, not the hurt. Release the anger. It really is a gift to yourself to release the emotional tie, the shackle that you have so deeply implanted to hold on to your hurt. How dare they do this? I can't believe I was so wronged. This is terrible. I was so hurt. If you keep holding on to that, as we said before, what you focus on grows. So instead of holding on to the hurt, hold on to the healing. I forgive them. I learned some things I didn't know before. I had an experience I don't want again, but I will create stronger boundaries. So I am not that person again. I am not taken advantage of, or I'm not talked to in that way. So in essence, I forgive them, and I've learned something from this experience. When you get to that step, you really can release the pain and the suffering, right? When you are working in forgiveness with your love partner, there may be things that keep happening over and over. If you are forgiving them for the same thing every weekend, and you're just like, this is not working for me, this is not working for me, there's an opportunity for you to look at what keeps pushing you out of spring towards winter, because that's what's happening. If something keeps happening and you have to keep forgiving somebody for something over and over and over, you are one decision away from winter. You can erupt, you can shut down, you can stonewall, you can start criticizing, you can start throwing passive-aggressive digs. You can actually just throw aggressive digs, not even passive. You can be very blatantly obvious about how angry you are and how hurt and how disappointed or betrayed you feel. That is an absolute sign that everything should stop, and you need to look at that behavior. Why is this happening over and over and over? What is going on with them, with you, and with the relationship, that there is this negative pattern of behavior that keeps pushing you deeper and deeper and deeper into the darkness that you're literally 5 seconds away from another winter storm or even a blizzard, right? So forgiveness is really not to be used as a, like a daily tool. If there's a lot of things to forgive, there might be a lot of work, but if it's ongoing and pattern like that, we need to think about what's going on underneath. Like, what are those root causes? Go back to those hot buttons. Go back to those core beliefs about what winter is and what your family of origin taught you about conflict. Maybe for some people, that's how they communicate, right? They don't have healthier communication styles. We will get to that later in the course. But for some people, that's the way it is. So they need to be taught and they need to be explained. Hey, that actually really hurts me. When you talk to me like that, I feel this way. Do you know that I feel that way when you speak that way? No, I had no idea. Okay, so can we try this other way, or what can we work out together? Because I really can't be in this space constantly feeling criticized all the time, right? And they just had no idea. So it is opportunities. Spring is full of opportunity for rebirth and renewal, just as conversation is. So through the apology and forgiveness paradigm, I want you to practice on things that aren't necessarily driving your big emotions. Practice on some small stuff. Get really comfortable with the process of recalling the incident, feeling empathy, remembering altruistically how good it felt to be forgiven for something you did wrong, because we all make mistakes. It's totally normal and human. But the feeling of somebody forgiving you is a pretty powerful feeling. So remember that in your bones, and then commit to sharing why you're forgiving this other person. What have you gotten from this experience? And then release it, right? Hold on to the healing. So through these two apologies and forgiveness exercises, I think we're in a really good place to continue moving through spring, because we want to release what we're bringing from winter, right? Remember, we just came from winter. It was cold, it was dark, it was blustery, it was frigid, it was isolating, it was harsh. The wind was like cutting at our skin. It was burning through our clothes and freezing our bones. There was nothing picturesque and gorgeous about it, right? It was really harsh and brutal. So we don't want to continue going forward when we're still carrying all the stuff from winter. We have to release it to really step into summer. If we have one foot in winter, we cannot cross the bridge to summer. It doesn't matter how short the bridge in spring is, we cannot be in two seasons at once, right? So to fully be in spring, to fully go to summer, we fully need to leave winter behind. And that absolutely requires apologizing for the things you've done wrong, take responsibility for your part in everything, and then forgiving your partner for their part, for the things they are acknowledging that they did wrong, or that they did that were hurtful to you, or that they did out of fear or out of other motivations that just weren't even true or accurate, or through misinformation, they made wrong decisions. So practice this. This is a big one. We do not grow up practicing apologizing and forgiving very often. So for some of us, this might be the very first time it's been spelled out in a system before. And I want to acknowledge that this is a lot of emotional labor, right? We are carrying a lot of emotions with us through this process. So be gentle with yourself. If you are getting to the second stage of forgiveness and you cannot empathize and understand their point of view, and you get ramped up again, you're not ready to forgive. You're still hurt. You're still hurt. Give yourself time to grieve that, to process it, to understand it more. Maybe you need more information. Maybe you need more time. Maybe you need to physically get some distance so that you can really just decide that you want to release this. Some people want to hold on to it, right? There are people who are like, no, I am hurt. I am not letting go. I am going to hold on to it, and I'm going to remind them every day that they hurt me. And that is not the path to summer. Okay, so you can do that, and your relationship can continue to be in winter. And I have clients whose relationships have been in winter for a very long time, right? Because they're not ready to let go, because they are afraid of something. Everyone has different things that motivate them to make the decisions that they make. But one thing is clear, is when you are ready to release it, when you are ready to fully apologize and fully forgive, you can take off those huge, heavy winter clothes. You can put down that huge, heavy burden of winter and all the hurt and the just the sadness and disappointment and frustration and irritation and anger and disappointment and all those feelings, you can put them down. Because we're in spring and we need to get our hands dirty in a different way and go into our gardens. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. I will see you in the next video. All the best.